Good afternoon and welcome to our conversation for this afternoon. This is the Next Generation Women Speaks, and it's part of the Creative Uprising that forms part of the Basha Uhuru Festival. This afternoon, I am absolutely delighted to get to spend some time with these two sisters. I have Siphokazi Jonas and Nomashenge Dlamini joining me in conversation about all kinds of things, really, just about this journey of being a creative, being a woman in this industry. Welcome to the afternoon, to the conversation this afternoon, ladies.
Thank you. Thank you for having us.
So it is really good to see you. We have been so far apart from each other. So yeah, even if it is through these screens, it's good to see you. Before we get into the conversation though, can I ask that you just introduce yourself, tell us a bit about yourself and the work that you do. And I will kick off with Siphokazi Jonas.
Thank you so much, guys. As you say, it's been really long, but this is good. This is good. So my name is Siphokazi Jonas, and I am a writer, performer, playwright, director, and producer. All the slashes.
All of the slashes.
All the slashes, and teacher, actually, as demanded by this moment. And that is what I do. So really, it's a combination of writing, performance, and education. Those are my three main areas of work and passion, really.
And Nomashenge?
Okay, I'm Nomashenge, and I am a poet and performer. That is all. I just always have been a writer, and then it just moved particularly into poetry as a medium because it's just so perfect. And yeah, that's all.
Awesome. That is perfect. I am a super fan of both of your work. I think that the work that you guys do is absolutely phenomenal. So really glad to be able to speak to you today and to really dive deeper into these beautiful minds that produce this work that you do. So I'm going to kick off actually from something you've just spoken about, Nomashenge, now, and that's sort of the journey that you've taken into the art form. Could you tell us a bit about how that journey even started? Who got you introduced to poetry as a thing that one can do for a living,
It started off in primary school, literature class, the poets that were introduced during that point. I became interested in literature as in general, and I started writing short stories and essays and poems as part of school, right? And then I don't really know when the switch happened when I saw Lebo Mashile on TV doing spoken word. And that was actually it then for me. It was then done. And then the second person I heard doing poetry would have been Tumi Mulekani when he did Live at the
Baseline. Live at the Baseline.
That's it. And that was it, it got transferred from just me reading poetry and sort of imagining how the poet would sound in my head into what a poet sounds like when they are doing their own work, and then that is the spoken word. Hooked forever. It was just beautiful, and also I had a lot of hip hop going on as well. I was consuming a lot of hip hop in primary school, and the transition into poetry and spoken word became so much more easier because it was all in the hip hop. The rhymes and the way that they were flowing and the metaphors and the double entendres, everything that was in hip hop was already in poetry, and it was just, I don't know, it was natural. It felt natural.
It's so crazy to hear your story because I feel like you are me. Like literally, like everything you're speaking about, the introduction, those artists that you're listening to. I mean, everything up until the point where you actually become a poet or a musician, because that's the part I didn't quite do. And Siphokazi, your journey. How did you get introduced to this work that you do?
I think there's actually some similarities there because I was a kind of geeky theater kid who read all the time, even when I wasn't supposed to. Actually got into trouble a few times for like reading during biology, because I thought, I thought the novels were more interesting than what was happening in front of me. But so primary school, I was, that kid who was in Stedford's plays, drama club. And so my introduction to writing itself actually came in high school, and that was through my English teacher. Because I never really thought of writing my own work, because in an said, but you'd have to perform published work. I'm still trying to find the exact moment when I realized that, as a Black girl, I could write, because a lot of the work that was introduced was, as I like to say, dead white men. And but whatever that spark was, happened around grade 9. It was standard 7 at the time, and I just remember writing my first poem. I was sitting in class during break, and I just was writing about what I'm seeing, and I shared it with my English teacher, and that was actually the beginning of this sort of back and forth. And I actually still have those first few books that I wrote in when I was in high school. So I would write and then give it to her, and she put a bit of feedback, and then so that was actually a very pivotal relationship. Then I started entering these not really competitions, but I just remember in East London you'd be able to submit, and then they'd invite the poets who made it to the top. What? Okay, I guess it's kind of a competition, but sort of even so, and that's when even my travels with poetry started. Where my English teacher who had to jump in a combi and drive off to East London, and then I was introduced to English Alive, which is where I had a couple of poems published from grade 10 to grade 12. And so it was actually that introduction to writing. And I remember reading my first ever poem in high school during assembly, the most nerve-wracking thing I have ever done. Just reading, and there's no mic, and you have 500 kids in that hall, and the only people can really hear you are like the teachers behind you. But whatever, it was actually scarier than any play that I'd been, any I Stedford, because I had to claim my voice.
Yeah.
But my introduction to spoken word actually happened when I went to university, and that was through YouTube. And then I also met a friend who was at church who was actually already doing spoken word, because I thought you just read what you do. But spoken word was actually for me through the internet. And then Lebo Mashile, who's I think foundational for many of us, especially because of television, was the moment of my introduction to spoken word. And realizing that you can make a living of it, probably still in progress. But it's when you find out. Probably a lot of our models were American poets, and poets in the UK who oh wait, they now come over here and people are paying money, paying for tickets to be able to see them. I thought, okay, maybe it's possible to do more than just read it as a hobby.
Amazing, man. It's actually quite lovely how similar the stories are, and the influences that we have. Speaking about those influences, when you look back at sort of your writing in the earlier years as well, whose writing, whose work really had an impact on your life, if you can pick out one of them, who influenced you in those early years?
Can I pick two, actually?
Go right ahead.
Because I think they were different.
Yeah.
And so one of the first people that I think of is Malika Ndlovu. So she was a big influence, especially in terms of reading. And then on the performance side, I would probably say like Striver's Role, because they were really big at the time. So those are probably my early influences into this idea of spoken word. For the side of Malika, probably around storytelling. And her intimacy around like writing about women. And then Striver's Role would probably have been the performance side of what spoken word is, although I would say I've definitely moved away from that. But certainly, foundational influences.
Sure. And Nomashenge?
On my side, it would probably be Nomashenge and Tumi Mulekane. Those are the first people, Black people from the country that I ever heard perform poetry. So, and the hip hop thing is huge in my head, and so Tumi was a very pivotal part of my writing. I think I started off trying to sound cool, writing cool because of hip hop, because of the way Tumi sounded and the metaphors and all of that shit. I wanted to do that. I wanted to sound like that, right? But Lebo, she brought a depth, and she provoked so much more, and my thoughts about what was happening to me in my world at that time, especially because of that show, because she would travel and then she would meet different people and have the conversations and then have the poem. So it was like she really influenced me when it came to the substance, like what are you writing about? What are you saying? Why are you saying it? Yeah, definitely those two people.
That Latitude show, I actually need to write a letter to someone to bring that back, because that show was really amazing. I think also for all of us in South Africa, just to see poetry like this, and just to change the way you view it, at least for me, is what that show did a lot of. Right. So today's all about conversation, but it's also about the poetry. And I'm excited because I haven't got to experience you guys in too long. So could you share some poetry, some poems with us before we continue the rest of the conversation? We will kick off with Siphokazi, and right after we'll then go for Nomashenge.
Right. So I'll read two short poems. And the first actually kind of links to what we're talking about around becoming what we are. And it's an oldie, but hopefully a goodie. Of dreams and mealy meal. You might have wished to be a poet before you were wife and mother of so-and-so, pressed as you were between the dark mountain of Verwoerd's embargo on native ambitions and the flooded valley of a world fashioned for the whims of men. Contemplated your resemblance, perhaps, to the bruised bodies of grain ushered into the gluttonous belly of a grinding stone, a single kernel pitched back and forth under the press of history. Wished yourself to be a grinding stone, wished your daughters to be grinding stones. Still, in the discretion of night strangling fire, you imagine the grass mat beneath you to be a woven page, and you a praise poem improvising endless ways to tutor yourself away from this place, unsheathing your dreams like blades of dry grass from the Rondavo's thatched sky above you. The moon and the wind declare us gathered around bowls of unga, nepapa, nompokoqo, all the contingencies we forge when our grandmothers are food for grinding stones. In these poems, I am sifting through mealy meal with my fingers and my back towards the mountain. And then the second poem that I want to read is Big Shoes. Do you remember playing dress up in Mama's two big shoes and bag, and how her satin blouse wore you to the knees? Eventually, you grow into her, then outgrow things neither of you are willing to undress. You are still an imposter in your mother's tongue. There are things you want to unpack out of this bag, but you don't have the language to do so. When you write in isiXhosa, you feel as if everyone is looking at how tight and narrow English is on your feet, rubbing you so raw you are now a bone out of place and a bunion of cultures at war. All you want is to wear your mother tongue around town without limping.
All right. Thank you. Nomashenge?
What did you say? Outgrowing things you're not even willing to undress. That's so true.
That's so layered also.
That's really intense. Okay, I will also share 2 short poems. I will share untitled poems. The first one is, you with thoughts that fiddle, with demons that mold you despite your reason. There is no lullaby to calm the torture of yourself. You are always there, biting your tongue. You with bones as riddles, with flesh that holds you despite your treason. There is no alibi to excuse the murder of yourself. You are always there, watching, partaking. Now I know you are all packed and ready to stay. With this life having shown you slain, your ashes the fairy dust of ghosts, phantom limbs flapping in attempts to wink it, levitate. And the second one, in the limbo where death abstains, but licks his prey with sinful tongue, the mortal poet, courage faint, goes limb by limb within herself. There abandons all her cargo. She sheds the dreaded white disease. The striped life her limbs has tangled, all this to aid her mother's ease. The float begins, her spirit buoy, her lifeless portion spewed along. With God's saliva mends the toy, his spitting image now bygone.
Amazing, amazing.
Rhythm, like I just want to say, just rhythmically, you are. But when you spoke about the hip hop influences, yeah, no, for sure.
And I think you totally see it like when you're performing with the music, like you are one with it. Thank you so much for sharing, ladies. We'll be having a bit more of that. That was nice. That was nice. So a thing I like doing, I don't know if anybody else is doing it, especially in these Zoom rooms or whatnot, is looking at people's reactions when other people are performing. Like there's such like deep and genuine poetry has that thing, man. It moves you so, so deeply, you know, and especially writers who do things the way you guys do things, you know. So thank you. Thank you for that. I don't think that you can have a genuine conversation at all without just checking in on how people are doing in this year specifically. You know, I think it's one that has been so tough on the spirit, tough on the pocket, tough on the mind, just a tough one, you know. But also nice to see that there are some gems that are shining through all of that, you know. If there's one thing that COVID has done globally is it has literally brought like entire industries to their knees, you know. And I think the creative industry, the creative sector is one that has been one of those that have been hardest hit, you know. And we really got to hear the reality on the ground, especially sort of going into lockdown and that level 5 where everything as an artist, you know, was shut down. How was that for you guys? How are you guys doing? You know, let's start with Siphokazi maybe. How's this year been for you as we reflect back on it?
It feels like we've lived through multiple years because besides losing sense of time is, you know, I've had multiple experiences, and it started from right at the beginning, you know, all the shock and trying to find your feet and the realization of not having rent, right? Like right at the beginning, I remember the first 2 months, I got to a point, probably the lowest point was when I was ready to go back home because I could not generate income. And, like just the rent is piling up, the costs are piling up. So what's the point? It was really difficult. And I remember having this crisis of, for the first time ever, I feel like I've failed at this. Like, I know it's not my fault, but I've actually failed. And I remember saying to my sister, like, like, I feel like I've been fired. And as a freelancer, as a self-employed artist, that is difficult to contend with, because the idea of being your own boss means you don't really ever expect to have that feeling. But when you cannot generate income, when you cannot use your tools, I was just like, okay, this is it. And I actually cried because I've spent so many years fighting to make this a success, to fight for this and to show its validity, right? And so for one, okay, fine, the global pandemic, like, it's a big deal, but it just feels like one event to completely wipe out more than 10 years worth of effort was crushing. And so that was like the first wave of lockdown for me. And then the second was now, okay, what now? Because I don't really want to go home, simply because I don't want to fail. I don't want to give up, right? And that was when we actually came up with the idea of streaming We Are Dying Here, and saying, what do we have at our disposal, and what do we, what tools can we use in trying to pivot? That was the word, pivot. Into the
word of 2020, pivot.
So I was like, how do we pivot? And that actually opened up an entirely new reality for us. And it started connecting us to audiences outside of South Africa, actually. And it changed my thinking. It was really, really transformative, to the point where now it's just my thinking around creating work isn't just for the live space. It's like, how can you then make sure that you're actually catering to both? And it feels like it's actually influenced it the other way around. It's like, okay, what has the digital and the online space offered me that we can now bring into live performance as well? So I'm really excited to kind of work out some of those ideas which I have. So now it feels, I guess, a little bit more hopeful, because I have no aspirations of going back to a previous version of what it meant to be an artist. Now I'm really looking forward in terms of how do we make the best of what we have, and actually to pioneer, because that's the opportunity we have, right? It's like, okay, how do we just break new ground and run with it? So kind of scary in that regard, but also really, really exciting. So it's been wild.
Wild. Nomashenge babes, how you doing?
I think this whole year, this experience has really highlighted for me the privileges that I have, especially then compared to obviously people who don't have those privileges, right? And it became heartbreaking, right, to have these privileges and also not really know what to do so that everybody else is okay. And also that being impossible if you were trying to do it alone. And then concurrently also working in the health sector, I was just very scared for most of the time. I even contracted COVID, and I was scared for a long time. And it was like, it's a very lonely disease, because you have to be alone. You can't be with anybody else. You can't really be, get the physical support that you need often when you're sick. It's terrible. It's terrible. But it's also exciting, as Fischer has said, these new avenues and the new ways in which artists are finding platforms and still expressing themselves. Also showing that you can't really destroy the art or artists. It will always be there, and it will strive even when it seems like it's not going to happen. And it's been really exciting to see those platforms. But then also for me as an artist now, trying to get on those platforms, also one of the reasons why this was my first Zoom meeting is because I'm a live performer. You know what I'm saying? Like that's what I strive off, and the audience and the energy and the people on stage. That's it, you know. So these Zoom and at home type works have been impossible for me. You know, even now I'm very nervous. I'm pushing through, you know, but I'm very nervous about it because I feel like I'm not really expressing it optimally at its optimal environment where it should be on stage, right? But also that I kind of feel like I am a spoiled brat, and you know, I feel like you should be able to push through and find a way, right? I don't know. I'm still navigating.
Yeah.
Very weird about it. I definitely want to go back to stage. I want to go back to stage. I'm not.
Yeah, and I guess it's like the ultimate fight between like the future and the past. Like the present is sort of like a mix of both of those, you know, and like you're being pulled to like, look, the future of work, the future of being an artist, and it's all this digital stuff. But there's also like what we're used to, what we know, you know, and like there's nothing that replaces that energy of the audience, you know, when you're on stage and you're trying to like host a show or you're trying to perform, you know, like you feed off of that energy, you know, and that's what keeps you going. And now we're in these Zoom rooms, you're literally by yourself, you know, and you've got to create the energy and still want to communicate it. And that there's like a spiritual connection that happens with the work, you know, and where does that sit? Like, I don't know, does the spiritual connection travel through the airwaves? And, you know, but I think the beautiful thing, I guess, about it being spiritual is that it goes beyond this. So you are still able to be touched and to make those connections. But it's that difficult, like, I want to go back to that, but I also realize that this is, you know, what I need to embrace. Hectic, man. Hectic.
Also got to interrogate the work, you know, and why we're doing it. And if the way we're doing it is the point. Is it the work or the way the work is done? And yeah, I think I've had to just go back. I've had to go back to reading my work and figuring where did this come from, and can I, like you say, recreate it by myself, right here alone, and then present it on air, like on a digital platform like this.
So you spoke about this single event, yes, a global one, but a single moment that like brings stuff into like a completely different perspective. And I think, and perspective and a sharp focus, you know, and I think one of the sharp focuses that have been brought to attention is the financial instability of being an artist, you know. It's crazy. Like it's actually borderline ridiculous how like this thing that feeds so many people and that is like the base of so many industries, you know, the people who are behind the scenes, the artists, like you cannot live off of this thing, you know, even though we come as audiences and we like suck from you, you know. What have you had to do to fund the art, you know, because it's still a thing you want to do, you know, so you've had to find a way over the years to still make it possible. I'll start with Nomashenge. What is funding and has been funding the art in your life?
Work as in a 9 to 5. You know, if I wasn't working, I wouldn't have been able to do most of what I've done because, well, I think I would have probably tried to find other avenues and reach out, right? But you know, everything like pre-COVID, the traveling, the paying of instrumentalists to work with, the rehearsals, everything comes from that. I work the 9 to 5, and then I use that salary and I put it into the art. You know, even now I'm in rehearsals right now, and I've had to buy a lot of equipment. You know, I've had to sort of start from scratch and get equipment and things that I never thought I would even have to get, right? But like I said, I've been privileged. I am privileged to have this job that I can use to pay for all of these things, because the arts have never been able to pay my people who I work with a lot, the guitarists I work with a lot, never been able to pay people enough, you know. If I would get a gig, all of the money that would come from that gig would be just for rehearsal, you know, and sometimes much less, you know. So yeah, like that's it. That's my funding. You know, that's my funding.
What do you do for a living? Just out of interest sake, the nine to five. Sorry.
I'm a pharmacist. I mean,
Interesting. I think I want to start like a little like mini documentary on the like, you know, the secret lives of poets, you know, like when they're not on stage, this is their other life. And Siphokazi, for you?
I think I've been fortunate in the last 2 years working full time, in that all of those slashes were a matter of survival. If I was just doing poetry, I would not even, I mean, bread, you know. It's just so sparse, you know, in terms of gigs, and yeah, just the instability. And so for me, theater has actually really come through for me, but it's also like different types of things. So that means whether it's performance, whether it's directing or producing a production, or you know, some commissioned work in terms of writing, workshops, you know, kind of done a couple of workshops, getting that, and you know, ticket sales in terms of performances, and that's maybe a whole other conversation around audience and marketing and whatnot, but ticket sales are just not it. You don't make those parts happen. They just don't. And you know, as Nomashenge said, sometimes it's just to pay your band or just to pay your cost, if that, but you're still going to pay out of pocket. Venue, the overheads are really, really high, which is what makes me nervous about not having full houses in terms of right now, you know, with everything happening around COVID. We're not going to meet even the basics that we could meet. So yeah, it was like gigs funding other gigs. I would gig so that I could put on a production and pay rent and all of those things. So I was having those different streams of income within the arts. It has been a way. I've been fortunate in that now I do actually have a job. It's kind of a 9 to 5, but it's online teaching. And so that, I think, has created a great baseline of stability, you know, because now I'm not really working for rent when it comes to my creative output. So it's actually going to allow me to do more. So as Nomashenge was saying, like, okay, right, you'll be able to cover rent and all of those things. But yeah, I think the only time I ever got any outside funding was last year. I think I was part of the BASA debut program, and then I won a grant to be able to do a project. And so it allowed me to get a lot of equipment and things to be able to run workshops and all of those things, you know, which are just so costly. And it actually allowed us to develop We Are Dying Here. So that's the only time I've ever had any other kind of funding. In fact, that's when I realized that, you know, that being self-funded is so risky, because I've been telling the story, like I used all my savings to get We Are Dying Here to Joburg. And I remember thinking, okay, when I come back, I've got a couple of gigs lined up and I'll be able to at least make part of it back. That was end of Feb. And a lot of the gigs were coming like sort of end of March, April, all the way up to about September, October. And then 20 something of March, they were like, no. And then you were getting emails of cancellations or postponements. And so that was the crisis, right? So I was like, okay, no, at least gone. And now I had no savings.
Sure. Guys, it's so ridiculous how like creatives, like being a creative is sort of like painted as like, you know, these lazy people who don't want to get jobs, and so they're just, you know, like artists, when like to be a creative, you have to put in so much work. You know, you have to do the 9 to 5, and then when you get home from like that 9 to 5, a 5 to whatever starts, you know, where in between you're doing that, you know, and having to use that to then fund the art, you know. And I guess it becomes a blessing, or like really great, where the 9 to 5 is also fulfilling, you know, it's also something that you do enjoy genuinely doing, and it can feed into the creative, or like you're saying, Siphokazi, where like within the creative, there's like different elements that are the income streams. But either way, umsebenzi, man, like always at work, you know. Phew, crazy, man. So what do you then say? Any advice to young women who are looking at you and are saying that like this is what I want to do as well? You know, advice to your young creatives who are coming up now, you know, what do they have to do to thrive at this creative thing?
Bro, I feel like I'm still a young creative on the come up who's looking at people and wanting that advice, you know? I don't know what to say.
Hmm. No,
I have no.
that's honest, yeah, hey? Gunzim.
I think because I have been doing it like full time, so I've kind of managed to experience a whole dearth of very interesting experiences. I would say, and also thinking about when I left my job, when I actually left UCT to pursue this, would be preparation. Although you can never be prepared enough, right? So the first thing would be like, as if you are in a 9 to 5 situation, to try and save as much as you can. That's going to tide you over until things can pick up. Um, Preparation, but also it's preparation in terms of learning stuff about the business. So I'm forever trying to learn, and not just within my field. Attending conferences, online things, so things about the business side of doing this, because it's a business. It's not just about the performance, it's not just about the writing. If you do get money, you have to think, what do you do with it? How do you make sure that this lasts? And I've spoken to a lot of people who are also freelancers in other fields to think about how they make this work, from small things like bundling up your subscriptions and your costs so that you can pay them once off, and not worry about the monthly payment, because you don't know which month you won't have money. Getting an accountant, even if it's like they're gonna work with you once or twice, so that they can help you with your SaaS stuff. So there's a lot of business aspects that you need to prepare for to put yourself in the best possible position. I would say also diversify as much as you can, and that for me certainly looks like, as I said, those previous slashes, but also collaboration. If you go at it alone, you unfortunately may not go very far. But if you collaborate, I think you have a better chance of being able to, sometimes even just being able to split costs. It's like we put in together and then whatever. So it's just the anxiety of carrying things by yourself can be overwhelming. So collaboration allows you to spread out the anxiety. So we must all be anxious together.
Yes.
But also it allows for cross-pollination of networks and resources. So you can tap into other people's networks. So I've worked with, and I know, for example, Nomashenge works a lot with music, but in terms of like theater, even outside of the arts, sometimes I've worked with people that, so I'll make an example with what we're doing with We're Dying Here. So now we've adapted it into a short film, but I have no contact in the film industry. But my friend who wanted to make the film loved it so much, but they have a whole world. They have access and the doorway into an entirely different world. And they were able to get the crew, the set, everything that was needed that I would never be able to get. So we just found that collaborative point, and both of us are sort of going to benefit from that. And so they're also now getting into really interested in directing poetry from a film perspective, which they would not be thinking about. So we've actually done other projects outside of the film, which have just started generating income for both of us. So yeah, I think collaboration for me is the most important thing.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm also taking it for collaborate. Yeah.
Awesome, and thank you for those wise words. But yeah, I think just the reality is that it is tough, it is challenging, but I think it's something that is also rewarding, So yeah, if you're willing to put in the work, then you can flourish, Back to the poems now, just to give us a young break from the conversation part. Who did we start with in the first one? We started with Siphokazi, right? I do believe so. So I think we can start with Nomashenge for some poems.
I will read two short poems once again. My poems are very short. This first one is The Scandal. The scandal of how you beckon breath, diaphragm bellowing to the winds of change. You bow to your greed, to your surprise, your body humbles you. Knows restraint, disciplines your living. Some see your thirst for tomorrow as a passion for drowning. Your lungs are no strangers to water. Why not perish the ocean? You are 7 parts water. Why not be the ocean? A raging diaspora, summoning the elements to mingle within you. Violent chimes collide to declare your coming. A tempest to prophet the waking of a savior. Oh, Judas, you awkward creature. Do you not know that I know there is a season for everything and then a season for all things? And then this next one is a hoax. A hoax frolics the hollow chest now, where idle arteries are arms churning monsters, frantic to catch the merciless ghost that gimmicks them into a tangle, unfree. Rinsed bloodless in a laughing satire, the ghost fails to mimic the humdrum of the absent tenant. It jollies about the soft parts, percussions my sternum into a racket. The clatter is a mockery to the song of my ease. I am diseased with stillness. Vessels turned tunnels, reaching inertia. Clots muddying the barefooted sanity now lost. Who will find it? Who will send out the brigade? Who will trigger the burning that will save our souls? The beast saunters on to naught, looting space from my marrow. My worship is hesitant. The prayer mats wing Aladdin now. The temple a parody of Pisa now. And there will be no hovering.
Thank you. Thank you, Nomashenge Dlamini. We also have Siphokazi Jonas. Would you actually pronounce your surname differently from what I just did? Siphokazi Jonas.
That's right.
Lovely. Siphokazi Jonas also joining us in the conversation.
I'm just still reading from the body parodying Tower of Pisa. I think mine is about to do the same. Sure. Okay, I'm gonna read one poem. I think it's medium in length. I'm not sure. And he took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." And he took the bread, and when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me, which is given for you. This is my body." Saying, and he gave it to them, he broke it. And when he had given thanks, he took the bread, he took the body. And when he had given thanks, he broke it and gave it to them, saying, "This is my bread, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me. Do this in remembrance of me. This is my thanks, which is given for you." And he gave it to them, broke it, saying, when he had given bread, "This is my body. This is my body." You break it, then give thanks. Do you remember saying, "This is your bread given for me in this body, me in remembrance," breaking thanks, taking bread, you doing this, saying this, me remembering how you break this body given to me. You make it yours, and I do remembrance. But there is no thanks to be given for broken bread. There is no thanks to be given for broken bodies. There is no thanks to be given for broken bodies. Bodies. Bodies.
Thank you.
For this poem, it reminds me of earlier when you were asking about influences and who influenced our writing and everything. And I remember that the Bible influenced a lot of my writing as well. Like this poem, for example, about the body and breaking the body and saying that this is your bread, that metaphor, that happens a lot throughout the Bible. And because of the Christian upbringing and, biblical narratives and all of that stuff, it also fed into very much. I mean, in Black society, most of the reading we do comes from the Bible. And as a kid, that's most of the reading that happened outside of school. It was just at church with parents or with family, biblical stuff. Really powerful shit.
It's actually the same, because for me, it's an ongoing influence. And I think I'm always trying to actually reimagine what that means within a contemporary context. So this particular poem I wrote when we were putting together We Are Dying Here, and I thought of, I was actually having this conversation with a friend about thinking of suffering, like Jesus is suffering, and then thinking about suffering in terms of gender-based violence and the breaking of the body and how it was voluntary, right, within that, and then rethinking what that is, linking to like, give us this day our daily bread, and daily violence. So it was just like really reinterpreting in a way that isn't just these traditional kind of models of the interpretation of the Bible, which are mainly men, right? It's like, so what does it mean for me as a woman to find myself within that narrative, and then reimagine it for myself? So it's been an ongoing thing.
And that's such an interesting take, because I actually really remember in the poem where you make that switch to then join it to like what's happening now with gender-based violence. I'm just like, oh shit, you did that with that. Nice. So just a point here, I'm just looking at the time there, and I think we've only got time for, let's say, one more part of this one. So what I'm going to do is the one about merging the art forms, because I do want to speak just a bit more about like the work that you do with the theater and now film as well, and then music. So the poetry reading after this, you can perform all of the poems that you have left that you had prepared, because essentially I'm taking one part away. Okay. So Tabiso, you need to edit out all of that I've just said right now. We're going into the third part. Cool. So as we close off the conversation, I now want to get into the work that you guys are producing, because like I said, what you do is magic, man. Like you really are able to use art and merge art forms as well to really tell some moving stories. And I'm interested in that, merging poetry and theater and I guess film now with We Are Dying Here. And then Nomashenge, the writing and the music, How did that come about? The idea of actually was like a very natural progression to then I'll start with Nomashenge with the music, How did the music meet the writing for you?
I think because of the hip hop consumption, that was really too much, right? There's this desire, that was always there to ensure that my poetry is, I don't know how to put it, like I can perform it as spoken word, and then I can also perform it as music or, different genres of music. So that's always been there, but then the way that it happened was kind of, I guess, kind of natural because of everything that was already happening in my head, That moment was informed by all of the listening of the music and the poetry and the writing and all that. So when I was in varsity, I was part of an art movement, and we performed shows probably every week, once a week. and I would have to perform spoken word in those shows. And then it just sort of happened that I wrote this one poem that was very rhythmic. You know, it just had this beat to it. And I used to perform that way then. From that point on, I just used to also write like that particularly. But then it got even more intense when I got out of school, because then I wanted to express it so much more. I wanted to write more lyrics, you know, and I wanted to challenge myself even more, to not just write poetry for performance and spoken word, but write poetry for both that and singing and rapping. And that's it. Like from that point on, it's just always been like, I try so much to do that, you know. I think that music is it's a very high art form, you know. It's very accessible. It moves you so much more and more easily than any other art form, for me at least. And I just found that my poetry became so much more, it reached out so much more, you know. And even if you didn't hear the words or what I was saying in the lyrics, you could feel it because of the way I was performing the music. And I suppose then it became more important to express the feeling, you know, and just be helped by different genres and forms. And yeah, from that point on, it just never ended. I just love it so much. I love doing it that way. I love being able to listen. Well, okay. I want people to be able to listen to my music, right? Just music lovers to listen to my music and love the music, but then going to the lyrics and also realize that the writing is on point, you know, it's poetry, you know, and I just love the idea of invoking that. It's cool. Yeah. And then I think also it goes back to what Siphokazi said, collaboration. It was so much easier for me to collaborate with instrumentalists rather than other writers, because I would just find it, I don't know how to put it, like it wasn't too much poetry, you know, I don't know. It wasn't too much writing and too much words. It had, you know, the music to accompany it, so it was just cool. I loved it. I love it still. Yeah.
It is super, super cool, and it really works, you know. I think for the kind of writer that you are, like I'm so glad you found the music, you know, because it's beautiful marriage. Siphokazi, I mean, I've seen your theater work, and now you spoke a bit about it moving to film as well. How's it been merging all of these art forms together?
I just want to say, Nomashenge, what you do is, I'm such a fan, and I think it's like a masterclass in form, right? And sometimes when it comes to spoken word, we're a little bit lax around form, because it's like free verse and just feelings and emotions on a mic. But just the thought and precision, it's transcendent. I really do believe it's like you have an understanding, a deep understanding of both forms. And so what happens, like Qhakaza said, is a beautiful marriage. So thank you for existing. Theater came first for me actually before poetry, in terms of when I was younger. So the love for theater has just actually preceded poetry. And so it was inevitable that at some point the two would merge. And I actually kind of had to find a certain confidence within myself to be like, actually, you know what? Let me put my ideas on stage. Let me push through, create my own thing. Although I've actually also discovered that there's already a term for that, especially thinking about something like We Are Dying Here, and another production which I did about 2-3 years ago, which is the choreo poem. And the thing about Ndozaki Shange, when I was like, okay, that's my niche. That's actually where I love to play, where I'm not trying to actually write a play that happens to be in poetry. It's like actually thinking very carefully again about the different forms, what those demands are, And I know sometimes, I'm sure for purists, you may think, there's too much compromise in either direction. But I found, and especially now as a director, to kind of lean into the form of both and let go of what does not yield, sort of what can't bear the pressure of what we're trying to do. So sometimes we find that even when working through the scripts, you have to cut things that work when you're behind the mic, but simply don't work when you're actually putting on a theatrical production. So there's a lot of reworking and rethinking, but also finding ways of giving the poems themselves their moment in a way that you maybe wouldn't with a normal monologue, or if you with a play, right? So thinking about scenes very differently. So all of that, I'm really excited to push more and more into that. And film has been actually amazing. It is. I can't wait for people to see the film version.
We can't wait. We can't wait.
Listen, okay. It's like when we're sitting in studio doing voiceover, when we're sitting with the sound engineer who was designing the sound for the entire film, and when you're working with a set designer who's like thinking through all of the imagery in a certain way, and you're working with the DOP. So just the collaboration was on a different level, because there are so many departments in filmmaking compared to what we do. And it was just, sure. I mean, and also having so when you're performing, generally when you're performing on stage, just the distance itself, there's a reliance on voice in a specific way, right? But when you have a close-up and hope that Chibame is just you like, oh my word. So I'm very excited about poetry and film. And also I think what was very clear for us was not to go for a kind of music video feel. It's not like that. It's a proper film.
I have been camping out on your timeline since I first saw that things are gone there. Nomashenge, I also have been camping out on yours since I saw that picture and you tagged that you with Tito, and I was just like, oh, things are brewing with both of you. Before we end the show, we should definitely speak about what it is that you guys are up to. My last question for the day, though, I'm always excited. I think being like Word and Sound and the work that we've done with like young poets and emerging voices, I'm always excited to find out who's out there, who's doing nice things out there. So are there any emerging voices that are coming out, or some new voices that are really exciting you at the moment that we really should, give a listen, give a read to? Nomashenge?
Not necessarily new, but I absolutely love Belisa Andre.
Ooh.
She is fucking incredible. She's just everything, Yeah. Right now, that's I think, her poetry is really pure. It's really, really poetry. And that's why I'm loving her so much. So every time she's on something, I want to go ahead and, log on to that and listen to her. I'm really loving Belisa Andre.
No, Belisa is an absolute gem. So we have another show as well as part of the Creative Uprising, and that's actually on tonight at 7 p.m. We have Belita Andre, there's Masai Sipuru, Hope Nichivambe, and Mthembu Simang on that one. So tasty. I can't wait. But yeah, Belita is absolutely fantastic. And Siphokazi, voices are exciting now.
Belita's definitely on my list. I'm definitely not emerging, but we'll see. Yeah. And in terms of voices who are actually really ahead, and I'm going to give them those Gen Z kind of kudos, who are doing interesting things for me around like the use of TikTok, the use of the digital space. Yamoria.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw the ad, but like.
Yeah, and it's so nice. So in Joburg, just as you drive, there's a highway over Newtown. They're on a billboard. You don't understand how I'm just like poets on a billboard for poetry, for spoken word, for just being so cool and just they're
make it cool. So I think if they would be ones that I would say let's look to when it comes to this pivoting to the digital.
Yeah. Even for me, I'm looking at them like, whoa, amazing.
So I think they have that capacity to make poetry popular, or to take it to those kind of spaces in a way that works, that is right, that isn't just like that's translated for that space, and not just, oh, we happen to put a poet in front of it. They have an understanding of what's going on, and
Awesomeness. Thank you, ladies, so much for this conversation. Like, I think as you prepare for a conversation, you never realize like how deep and genuine, and at times actually like emotional, especially in the beginning when we were talking about just this year, So thank you for being so open and for sharing so much. We're gonna close off with some poems from the both of you. But this has been fun. I hope you've enjoyed your afternoon together as well.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
It was good to see you.
Excuse me?
It was great to see you guys.
Yeah. No, this is awesome. Wait, before we go though, what are you guys working on? I know there's a picnic going on as well. Siphokazi, please could you tell us a bit about that?
Yeah, well, I'm actually in Joburg on the 28th.
28th of November.
Yes. So just hosting a poetry picnic. I'll be performing, inviting people to just bring a basket or chairs, food, and let's just hang. And it's just really intimate, outside, trying to keep it safe. And I'm surprisingly nervous actually for my first live performance. But I also think it's gonna be so fulfilling.
Yeah.
It will be.
Excited to share in that way.
Yeah.
And obviously the film at some point, we don't know yet, but the film is coming and we're gonna shake
time. We are patient, make magic. Nomashenge, is anything brewing?
I'm rehearsing for a live show that I'll be doing from home. But I'll tell you about everything when it gets closer to releasing it. I'm gonna pre-record and then do.
So excited for both of those. This is fun times, and it's like, we're getting into that time of the year, where you just want nice things, and it's so great that nice things are coming. Thank you so much for joining me this afternoon. So we're going to close off with Siphokazi and then Nomashenge afterwards.
Right. Thank you, Q.
I will read one longish poem, which was actually written around what this time has been for me and what I'm hoping it will become for us. Things you have never seen your mother do. Sitting at a sewing machine, making kingdom of table and chair, brown paper patterns and chalk spread before her like maps or battle plans, dividing fabric along its natural borders to style clothes into the countries of her imagination. Things in which you have never heard your mother speak. The language of pencil sketches and scissors. The resonance of a polyglot soothing the stuttering tongues of cashmere and cotton, satin or silk along some unseen dream shapes. Things you cannot count about your mother. The number of buttons restored. The splits she has sealed, seams under strain and lengths she has hemmed, needle in one hand and thread in the other. How many times she has licked on that one end of thread into a point sharp enough to fit through an eye. Things you do know about your mother. She never mends without first unraveling. She listens to both sides of the wound, lets it breathe until it can speak, until it tells her what kind of stitch is needed for healing. You also know that after all the unraveling and speaking and unraveling, she ties a knot so tight it is a living will, an heirloom never to be undone. That knot holds together what is lost between two pieces of fabric, between woven worlds. It is how you know she is a storyteller, by how she seeks the best point from which to pierce a narrative without wounding it again. The pathways she finds between characters as stubborn as denim, the new ones she must make, the healing that comes with new thread, making its way through ancient hurt, how she follows the path of piercing and seals us. There are other things she has stitched in you with the same precision. Along the seam of tearing skin, she turns it inside out and stitches you from within. Grapples with the fraying, reconciling threads imperfectly, but always on the end of the story is a knot as tight as a prayer. I would have to tear myself up again to undo it. Now we are being turned inside out and pierced, tracing the torn places and finding how they might speak to each other again. Reminded that a stitch only follows an unraveling, and we are unraveling. We are the edges of a fraying planet. We cannot live for ourselves alone, forced together at needle point. We are to remember all the days we sat at mother's feet, not quite paying attention, as she taught us how to thread an eye, how to tie a knot tight enough to hold a community, to mend a village through its children. We are here to remember healing ways, disguised as hemming stitches, to be selfless in mending what is torn.
Thank you, thank you. Nomashenge?
Cool. I will do two poems, one quite short and one medium, I guess. I've seen you dabble in archery, bending over backwards to trigger war for him. So many holes in you, he could flute a whistle. His breath a tempest to your hollow. He thinks himself God to this clay. You are just glad you can breathe through everywhere. Part of everything, soon to be no thing. Be sure not to kick the bucket while you hang in there. You unnerved me with your love for daisies, dear. The earth will swallow you, bones and all you will do is hover, like a tempest, unsettling the debris, screaming the end is near. He will shrine behind the spine of another, who will master archery and trigger peace for him. You will remember the hole came from you too. Throat too narrow, you wanted to breathe through everywhere. Part of everything, soon to be no thing. And this last one is called Civil Savage. I have scattered my bag of tricks in the face of chance. Riddled possibility with a sleeveless cloak, belly sagging from the heebie-jeebies. Gravity hankering for my receding knees. I'm thinking religion, but I'm just straight to her teeth. Mercy, mercy, I beg to live. Pardon my desperado, it's a mean disease. I'm yet to dig self-pity, a yawning pit, and recur in solitude. Yet to bury all dead things and heave a hymn. But all bygones misbehave at night, tremble with life and life for dreams to blight. I have stared down insomnia with the wrinkled eyelid laden with time and time and time again. The comrades are chanting spirituals. The comrades are chanting spirituals. I have jogged memory lane and braved the haunted house. They are creatures ducking the moonlight. Dawn save the world. Dawn save the world. Dawn save the world. Don't save the world. The last Messiah was a victim of crude audacity. Oh shit, my living is blasphemy. Sometimes mosaic, most times collage. I too have meddled with mediocrity's sweet melodies, devastated every attempt to have me sleep on myself. This little light of mine is a consuming fire. I have bathed in the suit of my enemies. Call me black, call me black, call me black. The comrades are chanting spirituals. The comrades are chanting spirituals. You pagans will perish with your white gospel. It's all black everything now. All lack brimming full how. We are redeeming all stolen goods and cluttering ourselves back to form vow. Shouldn't have tampered with the wild thing at rest. Time is disloyal, her arms swing in karma foul. Should have been more clockwise, clown. We're out here ticking your demise, correcting your gaping error, lose the frown. The comrades are chanting spirituals to the V-lost child. The fated crusade anticipated since slavery, a holy shadow ascends to strangle your vanity. A dark cloud reigns over you, all hail the exiles, for they have returned to reclaim themselves. Repent, repent, I say repent. The monster of your making thinks your limbs are for the taking.